Okay. Where are we? All right. Is anyone on? Is this working? Could be a test. I don't know. First time doing this. Probably got to iron out a few of the kinks. And I've lost my mark for what I wanted to have as my background. So it could be a few slow minutes for me getting this all fired up. But I think once we're up and running, we should be good to go. Hey, Mario, Jessica, can you guys hear me? I know it's a sound check, and a stupid, obvious question, but just want to make sure everything sounds good. Okay, thank you, Joe. I'm just going to fire this tweet off. But thanks for joining. Super short notice. Wouldn't usually do this, but happy to field any questions you guys have. I'll throw up my team on screen. Awesome. Space Kush, Wesley, Jessica, thank you guys. Awesome. And I'm going to reiterate this through the next, 60 minutes or so. This is just an Ask Me Anything. Nothing too crazy, nothing too formal about this. Just want to make it super easy for you guys, super laid back. I'll answer anything about your team you want, or at least provide you advice. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer this weekend, but hopefully can help you guys with your final decision making. And I know we've got the final free practice session tomorrow as well. So very much looking forward to seeing kind of what unfolds there too. Just trying to iron out some of these kinks on the left-hand side of my screen. Okay, I think we're all good to go. I think I actually duplicated a stream, but anyway, that's the beauty of trying to figure this out on the fly. Let me pull this across to this screen. Where did the live chat go? Oh, over here. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, guys. First time doing this, so it's super frustrating just ironing out all of the technical things on this side. But yes, I think I'm going to try and do a couple more of these throughout the season. I know it was super short notice, and I imagine most people in Europe and the UK are probably out at dinner, but I'm in New York, and so it's late afternoon here. And so I thought, look, work's cooled off for the afternoon, and I thought there's no better time to go through team strategies. I'm super pumped for Spa actually, because last year was a super good, it was a really good race. Max again, like this year, took a few grid penalties, and I think it was five place grid penalty last year. And I think that's definitely nothing he should be too worried about, because we know how good of a driver he is coming through the field. I'm not so sure kind of what 10 places means for him, because I honestly think he could, have no issues slicing through the cars ahead. And I think because qualifying is going to be a little wet as well, we could see a few surprises. I couldn't tell you who's looking good in wet qualifying. I mean, we look at Lando, Max, Lewis, all very good wet weather drivers. But I'm sure we're going to see surprises we don't even expect. And that's kind of the beauty of Spa. I think it's a super fun track. I think going up Eau Rouge, playing it on F1 23 is honestly probably my favorite part of the entire track. So I definitely think we'll see a few surprises. And, the team I've got on the screen here is by no means the one I've got locked in for tomorrow. I think I'll probably have to sleep on it, wake up tomorrow morning, watch FP3, then jump on the deadline stream with Adam from F1 Fantasy HQ. So, and then dissect my changes live on stream there. But I think there's probably, a few different teams that we've got, on the cards for this weekend. Like Joe's asked, can Max and 4 C tiers beat Norris, Piastri and 3 C tiers with McLaren and Mercedes? I think for me, and I'm probably a little more risk averse, that for McLaren, if you can get to Oscar, Lando, McLaren, Mercedes, and I could probably just do this on screen here. If you have a team something like this, I mean, this is probably, in terms of the back markers, the worst combination of drivers. I don't think this is a bad team at all. I've talked about it in my team selection video, and I definitely think we could see, if McLaren look as good as they did in practice, come through the field and absolutely slice it up. I definitely think, from what we saw as well last weekend, a 1-2 finish is certainly on the cards for them, certainly without Max right at the front from the get-go. But I think, my budget's also on the lower side. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Valtteri, Zhou, and Logan are all drivers most people have in their team. You might be able to get to a Hülkenberg or a Tsunoda or a Magnussen instead of one of these three guys on screen here. And if you have, any drivers that are better than Tu Sauber and Logan Sargent, I think that would make the decision a lot easier for me personally. But I feel as though, because I can't quite get in a Haas driver or Yuki Tsunoda, I am thinking about Max Verstappen as well. And if I reset my team here, for most people, you could probably get to Max in a couple of moves. I would need a -10. So for me, the logical moves would be Max, Yuki, and then I'd probably move in K-Mag for Logan Sargent or something like that. But I do think this could seriously work. And sorry, I'm going to hopefully not mess up the pronunciation of some of your names. But Drazum was thinking Max and 4 C tiers with Tsunoda. I think Yuki is the best C tier driver this weekend, just because of the news of that grid penalty. Someone joked on Twitter today that 60 places, I think, puts him all the way in Monza. So I think Yuki starting P20, I don't know if it's necessarily a better car than the Haas, but I do think the fact you're starting all the way back at a track with a high overtake rate makes his upside that much better. And we saw last year 6 C-tier drivers had price increases of $500,000 at Spa. So I definitely think that's going to happen again. And you look at Yuki, you look at Hülkenberg, Magnussen, all the best drivers in the midfield. So I definitely think they're in with the best shot of getting those price increases and those overtakes. I really want to see what the F1 simulations on F1 Fantasy Tools are, because I am curious to see whether or not this lineup actually outscores a McLaren triple up, which was what we just had on screen before. I think it largely depends on, first of all, how many overtakes this group can get, and whether or not Max actually ends up with a podium place and maybe even driver of the day. I believe he had driver of the day in 2022, but I don't think he got it last year. So I don't know, unless we saw a win from him, that he'd win it again, but you never know. Cadet asked, what about Norris, Piastri, McLaren, and Red Bull? I've seen a couple of those this afternoon and yesterday, and I think it's perfectly fine, but I've probably got cold feet over Sergio Perez. I think if you've got more faith in Checo than I do, then absolutely go for it. But what I would say is that he's gone out he's had qualifying crashes the last 2 weekends, if I'm not mistaken. He went out in Silverstone, definitely, and then he also hit the wall last week. So I don't know if a hat trick of Q1 exits is on the cards for him again this weekend, but you'd have to think that you're very much needing a good weekend from Checo. And I think the news is saying, unless he is putting in a close to a podium finish in Spa, his seat's probably lost for the year. So you'd need a pretty good result. His times in free practice haven't been all that great either. Why don't we just get up the free practice times quickly? And Adam and I will look at this again tomorrow. So if you are watching this not live, we will dissect all of the reports. I think Red Bull Constructor, for me, is probably a miss, because I'd more than likely want to move them out the following week. But if you already hold them, I think it's probably an easier case to make. It's just, I think you'd have to be confident Checo has a good weekend. Otherwise, it becomes a bit of a problem, as it has been the last few weeks. Elliot asks, hey man, given Ricciardo may go to RB in the summer, should we be thinking of including him? That's a really good question because I myself have no idea what F1 are going to do when Checo loses his seat in F1 Fantasy and whoever moves into that Red Bull seat, what they're priced at. My best guess, and I get the feeling this is what will happen, is that when Checo is removed from the game, should that happen, and let's call it Ricciardo. It could be Ricciardo, it could be Lawson, it could be Yuki Tsunoda. Let's say Ricciardo gets that Red Bull seat. I am of the view Ricciardo's driver card as a V-Carb driver right now will become inactive in the game, and he will be reinstated as a Red Bull driver at, let's call it 15 million. So if you own Ricciardo as a V-Carb driver right now, I don't think you would get the price increase should he be marked up by 10 million or whatever it might be. When he moves into Red Bull, I think you'll have to manually trade out your V-Carb driver, Ricciardo, and then replace him with the Red Bull Ricciardo if that ultimately happens. I just feel like it would be somewhat unfair if F1 just jacked up Ricciardo's price by 5 to 10 million out of nowhere, and some people are holding it, some people are not. I mean, maybe it's not fair. Maybe it's also some element of premeditation and strategy, but I just don't see that happening. When Sainz came in, his driver card was made... when Sainz was out for Saudi Arabia, his driver card was made inactive. So I probably see something like that happening again. But you never know. I've seen stranger things happen with this F1 fantasy game in the past. So anything's possible, but that's kind of how I see it playing out should Perez lose his seat and Tsunoda, Ricciardo, or Lawson replace it. Mario's asked, with 3 papayas, is it better Hulk, Sargent, and Albon, or Tsunoda, Bottas, and Sargent? So that's Tsunoda, Valtteri versus Hulk, Albon. I'm going to say Tsunoda, Valtteri because of the grid place penalty for Tsunoda. I don't think it's going to be a huge delta of points, but Hulk, we know, is a very good qualifier. Wasn't so great last weekend in Budapest, but I do think he's in with a decent shot of another top 10 in qualifying. I've got this up on screen, haven't I? Yeah, I do. So I definitely think he could put on another... Where did he finish in FP2? He was 16th, a bit slow. And K-Mag was a little bit further up. I suspect that Hulk's probably going to be at least in... He will get out of Q1. I'm pretty confident about that. So should that happen, it probably lessens his appeal when you've got the likes of Tsunoda slightly further back, making up the additional overtakes. So it for me, probably swings it that way. Where am I up to? Mercedes are not going to be strong here, Shashank thinks. From what we've seen so far, I wouldn't disagree. I thought we'd be seeing more from them through today's practice sessions. I did hear in FP2, I think it was, because I was watching the F1 TV broadcast, Jolyon Palmer, I think, said that they had their engine turned down a little bit, or it wasn't at the highest level of performance. So I wonder tomorrow in FP3, if Mercedes do move up the timing charts, that would be the product of that. I also thought the cooler temperatures might work in favor of that car, but again, haven't really seen any times to suggest that they've been that good. I don't know if it's enough for me to move out the Mercedes Constructor this weekend, but you never know. We could see a few surprises tomorrow morning. Wesley asked, is it worth downgrading from Norris to Piastri to build up budget? I think it's an option for sure. I actually did look at that myself earlier. I'll bring up my final thoughts for you guys. One of 3 options I was looking at was Piastri and Tsunoda in, Norris and Zhou out. I think Piastri is undervalued at 23.2 million as the only McLaren asset in the B tier. Assuming McLaren get another one too, I definitely think Piastri is going to go up another 0.3 million. If he wins the race, definitely another 1 million, but it's hard to say right now. I definitely think he's on for a price increase. I'd have to be convinced Norris isn't going to finish in the top 2 for me to move with this. I could well stick with a lineup like this or go for a lineup like this. I'm very much undecided, but I think for me it's coming down to 1 or 2. So they are pretty close. It would just yeah, I'll see how free practice goes before I make a decision on that. Ferrari mismanaging the power unit quickest at the end of the Kemmel Straight and losing 0.2 seconds. Yeah, Ferrari are an absolute mess right now. I don't know what, in terms of F1 fantasy anyway, I don't think we should be going near them at all. And not because they are terrible, but I just think with Mercedes and McLaren, they are an easy decision for us at the moment. Hey, Mike, good to have you on. Ish, how are you, mate? Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining. Luke has asked, I have Norris, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Joe Sargent. I have that team as well, 2 free trades. Is it worth to do Norris, Piastri to Verstappen and Tsunoda? I'm going to say no. And I think that's why I've not gone for a Max Verstappen for my team at the moment anyway. This is not my team, guys. I'll just be clear. This is my team currently once it refreshes. The reason why I like Piastri over Lando and Oscar over Max and Yuki is because I think McLaren will be 1-2 after qualifying. They don't have to get their elbows out and make all of these passes through traffic in the early stages of the race. I do think they'll be streets ahead of everyone else, assuming they kind of finish around the top 3 in qualifying. So I'm not too worried about, even if I do lose out on 5 to 10 points net by the end of the weekend, the fact that McLaren assets are a much easier long-term hold than Max makes the case easier. And for my team as well, if we just go back to this tweet here, I would have to take a -10 to get Max in. Well, not necessarily. I could just do these 2 trades. But having, 5 million on the side that I could upgrade Joe to Magnussen for a few extra overtakes would seem like the most prudent decision for me personally. And I'm going to have to reverse that when we get to Zandvoort anyway. So I'm very reluctant to move towards Max for me. But I think if you've got trades in hand and you can get in Max without -10s or without having to reverse in the following week at any extra cost to your team, I think Max is a very viable option. No, Franco, I don't think Ferrari is better than Mercedes. Give them a few more weeks. I'd like to see a bit more progress and consistency before I entertain them. Timo's asked, let's say Max qualifies 3rd, then starts from 13th and gets up to 5th. Will he get points for all those overtakes? Yes, he does. So there have been a few questions in the last couple of years since the scoring metrics have changed in F1 Fantasy. I think it was in 2022, the last year where you got points deducted if you took a grid penalty and had to make them back during the race. But yes, Max will get his points from qualifying, and then his starting grid position on the Sunday will be whatever the result is between his starting grid position and his Grand Prix finish will be the number of points he gets for positions gained plus any overtakes. So if he started, as you say in your example, starts 13th, gets up to 5th, that's 8 positions gained plus whatever overtakes he gets. Matthews asked, I want to get Yuki in my team. I need to either swap Ricciardo or Gasly. Who is better to dump? That is a great question. And I feel like Gasly has been probably one of the drivers I've paid less attention to because of how much bad luck he's had the last couple of weeks with reliability. And I do think Alpine is a team that we should probably monitor week to week on reliability because of the fact that Gasly's had the last 2 weeks DNFs and they have the worst record over the last 2 years of all teams with DNFs in the second half of the season. So I would probably avoid Gasly for now. But if you look at Ricciardo, his times weren't exactly anything special in FP2. They were pretty even there. Again, pretty even in FP1 as well. So I'd say Gasly as the cheaper option, I'm pretty sure he is anyway, probably means you can just enable a bit more. Was it 10.8 and 9.7? There you go. Yeah. So you might, if you've got enough trades in hand, you don't have any other pressing transfers, you might be able to use that extra 1.1 to upgrade another driver in your team if you went for Gasly instead. But go with your gut. FP3 might show us a bit more information on those two guys, and the simulations from F1 should come out this evening, US time and Europe time. So keep an eye on that. I said hello to Ish and Mike. I'm trying to catch up on the chat, guys. Sorry, I want to make sure I answer every question because it's the first time I've done this, and obviously the point of doing an Ask Me Anything is to make sure you guys have your questions answered. I'm sure some of you may already have settled on your teams by this point, but I'll do what I can to help. Carl's asked why Sonoda over K-Mag, and Lando the Boxer. Hey mate, thanks for dropping by. Why I like Sonoda, and it is, I'd say, closer than it usually would be week to week, is just because of the fact that of that grid penalty. Like Yuki's starting at the very back, so no matter what happens, he'll have, you know, a number of positions gained more for him to capitalize on than say K-Mag. I still think K-Mag's probably a Q1, low Q2 exit. He did have some good times in FP2, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was a top 8. Yeah, K-Mag finished 8th in FP2, and has a great straight line speed here as well. So I think that's good for them. Certainly if he goes out in Q1, but I think Yuki starting at the back makes it an instant win. And with the likelihood of more C-tier drivers going up in price, I think Yuki's primed for that as well. Shank asks, budget 125, Norris, Piastri, Hülkenberg. Oh, that's incredible. I wouldn't downgrade Sonoda for Albon. I think that's a great team. Norris, Piastri, Hülkenberg, Sonoda, Sargent, McLaren, Mercedes, 1.7 in the bank. Downgrading Sonoda, no, I'd absolutely keep Sonoda at the moment, just for this weekend at the very least. Drop Gasly for a Sauber. Yeah, I definitely think if you've had Gasly the last 2 races, it's an absolute kick in the guts. I don't think he's that bad. I think Sauber's, in my opinion, the worst teams on the worst team on the grid. I'll bring up my driver power rankings I had in my final thoughts video. I had this, in my final thoughts video. This is kind of, I probably actually should change this one. Let's change this here. You get to see the mind at work changing. I'd probably put K-Mag here, and then I'd probably put the Hülkenberg here. I think you could honestly say any of these guys are interchangeable, aside from just the top 3. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a hot second. Only because I do think I'm completely getting distracted here. Sauber's, what do I think of them? Bottas, I think Bottas is better than Zhou, but not by much. And I only put Sargent above Bottas because of the fact that Sargent's, 2.5 million less. So it just means you're able to enable better drivers in your team if you're deciding between one or the other. But again, if you're scarred by Gasly for the last 2 weeks, then go for Bottas. It's slightly more affordable. But again, I think it's quite subjective. Mastivos, how are you, mate? To get Piastri in my team with Norris, I'd opt to get Logan in to make it work. Is it worth it? That is a tricky one. I probably will, and I do think most people will be running Sargent to afford a double premium driver lineup. If you're going in that direction, there are very few teams that can get away with going for Lando and Oscar without needing Sargent. So there will be a lot of teams running him. So if he has a DNF, which I pray to God, touch wood, that it doesn't happen, it'll be fine. It's whether or not those teams running Verstappen or Norris with 4 premium drivers like Sonoda, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, etc., ultimately score more points. So I think Piastri, I really like, if you can, I think Piastri is a great option to own, even at the cost of owning Sargent for 1 week. Patrick, I messed up and accidentally locked in Norris, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Albon, Sargent with Red Bull and McLaren. Should I wildcard out of it or just leave it like that? If you've got, I honestly think that's fine. I don't think it's the end of the world, if I'm being honest. I don't know if it's worth a wild card, because I do think there'll be a wild card later in the year, an opportunity for wild card later in the year. Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Albon, they're all very good for overtakes at Spa. Norris, great 2x option. McLaren, great. Red Bull, I think, is perfectly okay. Max will get overtakes and positions gained. As long as Perez can finish inside the top 10, top 8. Where was it? It was the race before Silverstone where he finished in the top 8. No, he finished in the top 8 last week as well. But all he has to do is finish in the top 8 and Red Bull have a pretty respectable score. So I wouldn't say it's panic stations for a wild card. Take a -10 to bring in Ricciardo or just hold Bottas. I would hold Bottas, and Johnny agrees. Oh, Mike, I didn't actually know that Yuki would give Ricciardo a toe during quali, so it helps him qualify better even if he's worse to pick. That's a good point. Yuki, I still think, wants to get in a good qualifying, right? Even though he's starting from the back, because, Checo's seat's at risk, and I think Yuki wants to do as much as he possibly can to demonstrate to the Red Bull higher-ups that he's worthy of that seat. I don't know if he's actually going to get it. It could be Lawson, it could be Ricciardo, but I think that's a reason why Ricciardo could be in a void. If he gets toes from Yuki throughout qualifying, Ricciardo's going to finish, inside the top 10. He was inside the top 10 in qualifying last week, but probably something to think about in terms of in terms of what that means for Ricciardo's fantasy stock this week. I have Norris, Piastri, Hulkenberg. Okay, I'll bring the practice times up. Hang on. Norris, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Gasly with McLaren and Haas. 2 transfers. What should I do? I think the first one should be, no disrespect, Martin, but probably look at getting in Mercedes and instead of Haas. I'm trying to think how you could make this work with 2 transfers, because I'm not sure if you can. You'd probably have to get rid of Piastri, because Piastri's 23 and Haas is, let's have a look at this. We'll do a bit of live surgery on what Martin's team could look like. Haas is 10 million if I'm not mistaken? Yeah, 10.3. So your team looks something like this. Imagine if I accidentally locked in this team on stream. That would be disastrous. And I think you had Magnussen. So I think hypothetically, if your team looks something like this, the obvious move for me would be to get in Mercedes and then use that to get in Yuki Tsunoda. I think that's a pretty easy swap for 2 trades. Doit, thoughts? McLaren, Red Bull, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Verstappen, Piastri. I assume that's, or is that RB, Doit? Is that RB or VCARB? If it's Red Bull, I think that's an incredible team if you have that kind of budget. If it's VCARB, I'd probably look at moving VCARB out Doit. I do think, much like the team we were just looking at, you could probably take out Piastri or Verstappen and replace RB with Mercedes in 2 trades. I just think how I look at it when we're looking at constructors, it's probably stating the obvious for a few of you guys as well, is if you've got like a midfield or a back market constructor, let's call it RB or VCARB in this case, that Deutz just provided an example for. I look at that as Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, and Oscar Piastri. Does that team outscore, if we use the Mercedes constructor as a replacement, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Alex Albon? I think the Mercedes constructor will outscore the VCARB constructor plus the Piastri, for example. I'm not sure if that made sense, but I try and, when I'm looking at midfield constructors, break them out for each individual driver and then compare them side by side, because I just think it gives you a much better perspective on where the points will fall. And as we know in this game, the big constructors are who scored the big points. So I would definitely go down that path. I'm curious why Ricciardo isn't higher on this and not above at least one Alpine. It probably could be. I think that's such a fair question, to be completely honest. Just because, at least kind of how I did it when I did the rankings, was Alpine. Well, actually, what was? I think it was partly due to Ricciardo's price, wasn't it? Yeah. Look, I think you could put. I think you could honestly interchange. I'm sorry. I'll go back to the screen we had up before. I only have Ricciardo below Gasly and Alpine because of the fact that he's just not really been value for money this season. He's 32 points on the season. And even though when he does have good races, they're typically on the back of him qualifying further up the grid. And when he has bad races, he just doesn't seem to go anywhere. He's fighting through traffic. So whereas I feel as though Alpine have steadily been improving week on week. But I think now it feels like with the Alpine reliability coming into question a little bit, Ricciardo probably is edging a little bit further up. So yeah, good point, AFN. I don't disagree with you. Matt, how are you? I'm well. Hope you are. Really unsure what to do. I have 3 free transfers with the following team: Piastri, Russell, Hülkenberg, Bottas, Sargent, with 0.3 in the bank. So not the best team value. I feel you. I don't have a great team value myself. I'm assuming you've got Mercedes and McLaren constructors. So I'm trying to think. 0.3, what could you do with that team? I'm not sure, to be honest. I feel like let's bring up the old team on screen here. So this is also not my team. So you have Piastri, hang on, Russell. Let's just call Bottas Sargent for now. They're pretty much one and the same, aren't they? And then, so this is what your team, Matt, looks like with 0.3 in the bank. I feel like that's fine based on your budget. I get that it's not as desirable as some people that have 125 million plus budgets. The only move I could see happening in maybe 2 trades would be a Max Verstappen. If you feel compelled to make a move, you could go Max Verstappen and Tsunoda, for example. I think that's probably the only 2 moves. If you don't want to go down that path and stick with Piastri Russell, then I probably think you could just hold with your current lineup. Maybe Hülkenberg out, Albon in. But there is, with that current team, Matt, probably not like a great deal you could do. So I feel like that's probably the move there. You either stick with your current lineup or you twist to a max. Elliot's asked, should VCARB slow simulation pace worry those going for Tsunoda for a grid penalty? Yeah, it might. Mike's also just pointed out, I think the toe Yuki gets, the toe Yuki's giving to Ricciardo will definitely hurt Ricciardo's stock if he qualifies in Q3. I think the fact Yuki just starts at the back, regardless of the pace, is a plus for him because we don't really know most of the time what midfield and back marker drivers are going to qualify P18, P19, P20. So my guess is there's only upside for Tsunoda. They may not be the fastest car in the grid, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least 3 to 5 positions gain minimum from Yuki and, a few overtakes as well. That's like 8 to 10 points. Well, let's go to F1 Fantasy Tools, and I want to go to history at Belgium. So last year. So we had 6 current C-tier drivers go up in price there 12 months ago. And I think all we saw was a 10 to 12 points was all you needed to see for a price increase. Does it want to load? So if I saw Belgium 2023, I thought Nojo went up in price. Hang on. Price changes. That's what we can see. So Magnussen, Hülkenberg. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do. Magnussen, Hülkenberg went up in price. So if I filter that, sorry, I'm doing a bit of mental maths here. So Magnussen went up in price last year. He only needed to score 9 points. I guess what I'm trying to say here, to answer your point, Elliot, is that you probably, and I really can see this shaking out quite similarly again. Max was 68. I don't know if he'll score 60. Oh, he did get driver of the day last year. My apologies. Because he won the race as well from P6. So I honestly see something similar to 2023 shaking out where Max takes a grid penalty, probably drives out of his skin. I'd say he finishes top 3, top 4, gets a bunch of positions gained and overtakes. I don't know if he gets driver of the day, but that's still, 40 odd points. To going back to the C-tier drivers, I think all you're going to need to see from the midfield drivers is 8, 9, 10 points for a price increase. And if we take Yuki Yuki is an example, starting P20, he'll probably get, let's say, five positions gained, give or take, and he only needs 5 overtakes, and that's 10 points right there for a price rise. So it'll probably be two, maybe it could be anywhere between 9 and 12, 13 points for a C tier price increase. But honestly, Yuki's the best driver among all of them in the C tier for that kind of upside. So that's why I really like him, regardless of kind of how mixed the simulation pace looks for VCARB. Neil, 115 million current Piastri. I think we were just looking at the team like this, looking for balance between budget building and points gain. Piastri, Russell, it's the same team. It's just Albon. I think Neil, even though Ferrari, Mercedes are both B tiers, so I feel like that cancels itself out. It's tough for me to say whether or not Ferrari are suddenly back on the menu. I'd want to see at least one more good week from them before I entertain them. Mercedes, as I said earlier in the stream, I'm not sure if you were here for it, but there was speculation during FP2 that Mercedes had their engine turned down a little bit. So it may well just be we see a bit more improved performance from them tomorrow. I honestly think option 1's the better option if you're going for a combination of budget building and points gain. Hulkenberg, Albon, I think it'll be pretty even between those two, and Mercedes, I think, and Ferrari will be pretty even again. I think Mercedes are just a longer term hold because they've been more consistent more recently than Ferrari have. Thanks, Iceman. Appreciate the love. Radio Paddock. Cheers from Brazil, man. Good to have you in the stream. Alrighty. Johnny Walker. Isn't there a whiskey called Johnny Walker? I'm pretty sure there is. Would you suggest I use up the 3 transfers to try and build up some team value? I currently have $0 in the bank, but with Norris, Russell, Zhou, Bottas, Logan, which is probably what I'll end up having too. My position is 5K. Awesome rank. I feel like that's a pretty good, like a pretty decent lineup. I think if you're looking to build up some team value, I would recommend going for the Verstappen and 4 C tier drivers. But I know you're probably stuck a little bit on what your current team looks like. I'm going to bring up this screen again that I had in my final thoughts video in terms of where I see points versus budget shaking out. I think we're seeing the likelihood of more value increases running these C-tier drivers. As I said before, you're probably only going to need 9, 10, 11 points from any one of these guys to see a price increase. And you could also pair it with Verstappen. But if you've got a team like, you got 3 free transfers, you could probably go then Verstappen, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, something like that with 3 trades. I think that's perfectly fine. If you're looking to build value, I think the Verstappen, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, Sargent is probably the play there. I think it has like quite a high points upside if Max cracks the top 3 as well. Isaac, help. Currently Perez. Ooh, Perez. Help this brother out, guys. I think we need to... I'd say Perez is probably the first cab off the rank I would look to change. Perez signs Ferrari. If you've got only 2 free changes, okay. Let's see what we can do here. I think Perez, you could probably move out for... Let's bring up the team again. Perez is 23 and Piastri is 23. So I would probably move out Perez for Piastri. If we can try and do this in 2 trades, Isaac, let's try and do that. Perez, Piastri, I think is 1 trade. And then I would go... Could you get to Mercedes? I think you could, because I think Mercedes are less than Ferrari, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's an easy swap. I think go Perez out, Piastri in, and then Mercedes out. Sorry, Mercedes in, Ferrari out, and there's hold signs. I think you can address signs next week if you want. If you feel aggressive with making 1 or 2 more trades to get out signs, then I'd probably activate the wild card. El Rolio, 117 million, 3 transfers, current McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri, Russell, Gasly, Zhou, Sargent can't afford to get Verstappen in. I don't think Max is essential. I think he's got a lot of points upside, but I don't think it's worth upending your team to get one driver in, because we'll probably get rid of him in Zandvoort. Sorry, Matej. Sorry, I'm saying I might have missed it. There we go. Sorry. Okay, I think, did I say that right, Matej? I have the budget for Norris, Piastri, Sargent, Albon, Zhou, Mercedes, McLaren. Is it worth it, considering the latter three drivers might not get into Q2? Yeah, I think it's fine if they don't get into Q2. You don't want your Saubers and your Williams drivers getting into Q2, because it's more positions that they would likely lose. If you're running a team like what you've got on screen or something like that, where you've got, Lando Piastri or Lando George or Hamilton Piastri, whatever the combination might be, you want these two guys on the left. You want your premium drivers to qualify as high as possible and just hope they hold station throughout the entire race. And then you want your back markers like your Saubers and your Logan Sargent, even your Kevin Magnussen, to go out as soon as possible. So these guys probably will go out in Q1, and I definitely think that could well happen for possibly K-Mag as well. Hulk's the kind of guy that if you're going with, you're hoping he qualifies high and he just holds that position through the race. You don't want a situation like we saw in Budapest where he qualified P11, so didn't get any points for qualifying and then ended up losing positions in the race, ended up with 0. So you want drivers that typically get as high as possible and can hold station, or drivers that are out in Q1. Q2 is the absolute dead zone for fantasy. So Isaac, sorry, did I answered that? Yeah, 2 trades. El Rolio, can't afford Verstappen. I don't think you need to worry about getting Verstappen in. Tsunoda's in for Gasly. I really like that. You've got 3 transfers, so you probably want to use 2 then, right? Piastri, Russell, yeah, that's good. Albon, Hamilton in for Gasly and Russell. Could you do Hamilton, Tsunoda in for... Oh, no, I see what you mean. Okay. I think... honestly, I think probably the Gasly Russell is slightly better than Albon Hamilton, but I wouldn't say it's by much. And so, yeah, I'd probably go with that, because you want to use your 2 transfers if you've already got 3 available. I think budget building is indifferent depending on what lineup you go with. Okay. Okay. Silent sinner. I'm not gonna preach to the choir that Tsunoda is a must-have. I don't think he's must-have, but I think he is the best C-tier driver. And it's only because of the fact he's starting so far back. Now, I'm going to touch wood before I say this, but 2 weeks ago in Silverstone, Gasly took a grid penalty and started at the back. He didn't even start the race. He had that DNS before we even got on the formation lap, before we even got to lights out. So I don't think anyone is immune from DNFs or incidents on the race, but if you're going for C-tier drivers in that kind of $8 to $11 million price bracket, Tsunoda has to be the pick of the bunch just from starting so far back. And he has shown he can get into the points, maybe not from P20, but I definitely think he's on for about 10 points at least this weekend. Timo's asked Norris, Red Bull, McLaren, or Verstappen, McLaren, Mercedes. I'm going to say Verstappen, McLaren, Mercedes, because Sergio Perez has not shown enough consistency for me to want to go with Red Bull right now. And the fact that Checo is going out in Q1, Q2, it's hurting their teamwork points for qualifying and kind of offsets the pit stop points they're also getting. So, and they're no longer the best car either. So I think if you're kind of paying that money for Red Bull, was it 28 million, if I'm not mistaken, 29 million? You want to be seeing them winning races every single week, and we haven't seen that. Max has not won a race since Spain. So yeah, three races in a row, Russell, Hamilton and Piastri. I definitely think if we're not seeing wins from Red Bull, they're not really in my thoughts. Neil has asked, 2x driver choice, Piastri and Russell, considering mixed weather conditions. That's a good one. I feel like it's pretty even. I wish we had the F1 Fantasy Tools sims up. And not a criticism at all of these guys. They're phenomenal. Usually their points projections are very helpful with guiding our decision making and seeing what kind of the best teams are for the weekend. I think it's going to be pretty close. I would say Piastri, if money is no factor, just because McLaren looked like the better car. He looked much more consistent in FP1, FP2. He was P2 in both sessions. So that's why I really like Oscar. But I'm in a similar camp right now where I'm either going for this kind of lineup and maybe swapping out one of these two guys, or and essentially running these two, or I'm going for Oscar Piastri and having to downgrade Hülkenberg to another Sauber driver, which sounds kind of jarring, to be honest. I just think there's like so little budget to be gained running a team like this. Oscar's the only driver I can see, well, obviously Lando too, but that goes up in price after this weekend. None of these three guys I see going up in price. So that's why I was actually looking at, funny you mention it, a Russell Piastri, and then I think I had, sorry, let me reset the team because it's a bit easier to trace. I was looking at a team like this, putting in Oscar in favor of Lando Norris, and then upgrading Zhou or Sargent, whoever tickles my fancy, to Yuki Tsunoda. So I could do that in 2 moves. Don't mind that at all. Means I could easily get back to a Lando Norris next weekend as well. And I don't see myself being priced out because I see Lando going up 0.1, 0.2 million. And I see the Sauber guy, who was there before, Zhou, going down in price. Whereas I see these two guys going up in price, and the likelihood of that happening is much higher. So I could see myself doing something like this if A, I think Oscar can match Lando's fantasy production, and B, Yuki Tsunoda, as I expect, is primed for overtakes and positions gain and can continue that or can capitalize on that opportunity. I lost my mark again in the stream. Hey Tom, how are you, mate? I know you're back for a stream tomorrow. Been missing you, mate. I know you've said you want to get back into your videos on your channel, so enjoyed your content this week. Where am I? Dex. At the moment, I have Norris, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Gasly. Should I wildcard for Norris, Russell? Should I put Max and Sargent? Should I save a transfer? So many questions. I think, honestly, that team, Norris, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Gasly, is a great team. Assuming you got McLaren and Mercedes as 2 constructors, I wouldn't suddenly try and overhaul it. Maybe if you're trying to prep yourself for a switch back to 2 premium drivers in Zandvoort, and by 2 premiums it could be Norris, Piastri, Norris, Russell, then I would think about maybe downgrading Gasly, because at least using one of those trades, because I think you'd probably need 3 trades to get to a Norris, Russell or a Norris, Piastri at Zandvoort. You could do it this weekend too if you want to get ahead of it, but it sounds like you would need to wild card for that. But I still think this weekend's perfectly fine to run a Norris, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Tsunoda. Lots of overtakes, as I've said, and certainly those 4 drivers are some of the most likely to go up in price in the C tier. So buy-in, downgrade Norris to Russell, upgrade Sargent to Yuki, worth it? 2x will be on Piastri. I was just talking about that, so I think that's a perfectly fine option. Joe, Verstappen, Yuki, Albon, Magnussen, Hulk versus Norris, Piastri, Hülkenberg, Sargent, Zhou. I'm trying to cut out what are the mutual drivers in both. It's Albon, Magnussen, Yuki. Oh, it's actually the same. That's a completely different team. I would say it's tight. The reason I think I prefer the McLaren triple up with Norris, Piastri is that these 2 drivers are more than likely going to be at the top of the timing charts in not just free practice 3, but also qualifying. And sure, Max has got a really good shot at making overtakes and positions gained, but you do have somewhat of a risk of him firstly having to get his elbows out and fight with the midfield guys, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, to get into a podium position. And if he somehow gets stuck behind them, he ends up P5. The Max move has backfired pretty significantly. You want to, if you're going for Max this weekend, you absolutely have to think, or you want to think, he is going to finish on the podium at a minimum. Otherwise, I just can't see the value in spending that kind of money for 5, 6 overtakes. But that's just my opinion. If you're more optimistic, and I think he could easily finish on the podium, then go for it. It's just I like the sure thing of Norris, Piastri up the front. Okay. I've Norris in my team with 5.9 in the bank, so I can bring in Max in one move. Yeah, I think if you've Wajir, if you've planned to bring in Max, I think you absolutely should. Assuming you've got kind of other C tier drivers in that lineup. Sonoda, Micah, to answer your question. Tom, I hope my soothing voice is enough to get you through the editing and rendering of your video, because I couldn't think of many things worse than listening to me on a Friday evening. Bertram's asked, Norris, Russell, Bottas, Gasly, Hulkenberg, Ferrari, Mercedes. I want to do some budget building and get McLaren in. Well, it's kind of counterintuitive because McLaren's an A-tier asset, so I wouldn't say that's actually a budget building asset. But I think regardless of the fact that McLaren's A-tier, I'd definitely get them in for this weekend. I'd replace Ferrari with McLaren, and then if you've got enough budget to do that, otherwise probably look at moving out Russell and enabling a couple of better options in the midfield that you've currently got. What else have we got here, guys? I really want to do more of these Q&As. I really love talking to you guys. But it was just rather spontaneous. I feel like this is my first live stream, and usually I'd probably want to hype it up a little bit more, but at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, guys, let's go for a stream. William, we already set our teams. Not sure what you mean by that, mate, but for a second I thought F1 reset our teams. KM, Gasly still having issues with his car. Yeah, I'm just not sold on the Alpines right now. I do worry that that this is going to persist throughout the rest of the season. So I'm a bit skeptical of running them. Again, not sure if there's going to be any improvement in performance. They were for a moment kind of above Haas, above VCarb in the midfield, but it seems like they've fallen back a little bit. Where can I buy chips? I don't think it's a play to win game, Sammy. It is. How do you can't even activate it on this screen here. You go to use the chips, you go to the apply chips button, and then you can select any one of these. As you can see here, I've used 3 of them already, and I don't plan to use any others for the foreseeable future. Maybe final fix if anything crazy happened, but gotcha, William. Makes perfect sense now. But yeah, chips are not unfortunately ones we can buy. We just get assigned them and we use them. Dex, yeah, great question on why I'm streaming at this time. Couple of reasons. I don't usually do pre-deadline streams on this channel. I don't actually do streams on this channel, period. But I wanted to give it a shot. I had a bit of time in the afternoon, and I thought, look, if there's anyone around that has an interest in listening to me just ramble for an hour and a half, I'm happy to do that. I'm usually the hour before the deadline, before qualifying, streaming on FanAmp's YouTube channel. Details for FanAmp's YouTube channel is in the video description. I'll be there tomorrow, 1 hour before qualifying, with Adam from F1 Fantasy HQ. So that's usually when I do my streams. But I thought, look, at short notice, let's just give this a go. Nothing too crazy, just me and my fantasy team for 60 minutes. Piastri, Russell, should I autopilot or go for Piastri? I think Piastri's a perfectly fine choice. I don't know. I'd probably want to see wet weather or some other reason why the decision's harder for me to make. For example, when I used my autopilot in Canada, Samir, I had Leclerc and Hamilton. There was wet weather. It wasn't clear at all to me who the best driver fantasy-wise was for that weekend, and turned out the wet weather was enough to ruin Leclerc's weekend. So the decision paid off. I think Piastri versus Russell, it's going to be a dry race, and I think McLaren are a much stronger car than Mercedes, so the decision kind of makes itself. Jack, I have Norris, Bottas, Joe Magnussen, Hulkenberg, RB. I assume that's Red Bull. Bloody hell, I can't wait until VCarb isn't VCarb or RB anymore, because it's awfully confusing. I've moved to Piastri, Russell, Hulkenberg. Is it a bad move of me not to bring in either Tsunoda or Verstappen? No, I don't think it's a bad move at all. I'm not going to run Max Verstappen this weekend, not because I don't like it, but it just makes it harder for me to move back to this team for Zandvoort. So I don't think I don't think it's an issue if you don't have Tsunoda or Verstappen. Think about that low power Alpine engine here, Mike. I feel like this stream might be on low power. It's 5 in the afternoon. I'm not sure if I've got the energy for you guys, but hopefully you guys are putting up with me all right. Yeah, got it. No, you're all right, Jack. You're all right. I thought it was Red Bull. But I think it's perfectly fine to stick with your Piastri Russell. I think that looks great. Honestly, I was going to run a very similar lineup anyway, or may well run a similar lineup anyway. The F1 sims are out. Oh, I'm assuming these are the pace sims and not the F1 Fantasy Tools sims. But good call out, Sabine. Let's go to the F1 website. There we go. Practice debrief. Give me some of that good stuff, Lawrence. All right. Isn't quality usually? Let's start with quality. Chips at the local bodega. I'll go down to my bodega tomorrow, Mike, and I'll see if I can pick up myself an extra limitless. Okay. Let's go through the sims and I'll cover off a few more questions and maybe give us 10, 15 more minutes and then wrap up. Qualifying sims, Red Bull, unsurprising. I think that's mostly Max, though. I wouldn't say Perez is anywhere close to the top. McLaren, right there with them. Doesn't surprise me either, to be honest. I think honestly, we could see a McLaren pole. We saw it last weekend. A lockout 1-2. I definitely could see that going the same way this time around, especially because Lando and Oscar looked blisteringly fast in practice today as well. And then a bit further back, Ferrari, Mercedes. Isn't it fascinating? As soon as we go to a track where it's like a 1 minute 40, 1 minute 50 lap time, or maybe it's 150 for me on F123, 140 for the pros, that the delta between the times in some of the teams is drastically more than what it would be if we were at Austria, for example. I think it's pretty mix and match between these two guys on qualifying. Flip a coin. But I do think Mercedes are just a much more reliable constructor hold than Ferrari right now. And then pretty even. Further back, Aston Martin wouldn't be touching any of the Aston assets. Haas, good, but not great. Oh, yeah, okay. So RB right down the bottom here. Adam and I are going to dissect this tomorrow as well. So I feel like I'll be repeating myself a little bit. But I do like the look of the Haas guys. RB is worrying. I think it doesn't make a difference for Tsunoda because he's already starting P20 on the Sunday. Sauber, maybe that's a reason why. I still think Logan will be slow regardless of what the delta is. 2/100ths, not all that. Sorry, 2/10ths, not all that much. And then if we go up to, okay, this is interesting. RB at the bottom. Yuki, I don't know about this. I mean, I still think starting P20, it can only have upside. It's sure not a great sign for someone like Yuki Tsunoda, but I do suspect starting P20 means he'll get positions gained regardless, because I'm sure there will be drivers that DNF this weekend. So yeah, really, I think it's really a no-brainer for me. Sorry, I had the wrong header on the video, so I was looking at my points and budget gain. But yeah, interesting there. Race sims, Red Bull, McLaren, I think self-explanatory. Ferrari, Mercedes, very even, which I think means Mercedes are an easy hold this week too. Haas, great sign, top 5. Really like to see that. Magnussen will be on for a few overtakes as well. He's just been racking them up this season, hasn't he? All right, back to the questions. I'll leave these up for you guys to have a look at. Many people want to go for Max. I'd say go for Red Bull instead of Mercedes. Mercedes hasn't been strong. You get max points and fast pit stops. Danny, I completely agree with all of that. The one thing I will say is that you also get Sergio Perez. Is that a plus? I don't know. I'd say it's still, max points are great. Fastest pit stop points are great. But if Checo goes out in Q1 like he has done recently and has crashes, which he has done recently, that kind of offsets the fast pit stop points, don't you think? I do suspect McLaren will be the highest scoring constructor. And then I would say Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari are all going to be pretty even. It depends on Perez. If Perez finishes top 6, Red Bull should be the second highest scoring constructor, assuming Max finishes ahead of Checo. But I do think it could go either way depending on how Checo looks in practice. Garaculus, I think I'm at that. 116.8. Points with Norris, Russell, Bottas, Joe Sargent, or budget with Norris. It depends. If you want points, then I think that's the great, or do you want budget? I do suspect that the points team will be more attractive in Zandvoort after Spa because it is a slightly lower overtake track. I know we saw... Yeah, let's pull this up. Let's pull this up. I had this in my preview videos. Well, so we only saw 240 overtakes in Netherlands last year. That's because it was a wet race. So imagine Canada where K-Mag and Hulkenberg slapped on the Inters and overtook everyone. That was pretty much every driver last year. If you go all the way back to 2022, there were 23 overtakes. So 1 overtake per driver. I suspect Garaculus, to answer your question, this double premium driver lineup with Norris, Russell, and 3 crap drivers in Bottas, Joe, Sargent are probably going to be the popular picks in the Netherlands. So if you want to plan for a team like that in the next race after the summer break, then that looks perfectly fine. But you could also, if you're chasing a bit more budget, go for the Norris. I think it's quite indifferent. It really depends on how Mercedes look in free practice. Because if Russell and Hamilton are looking well off the pace, I'd maybe go for the budget lineup, but I think it's going to be pretty tight. Alrighty. Where am I in the chat? Let's bring this back up. God, I really need to get my my screens in order. This was a bit of a rush one, but anyway. Where are we here? MB. Using 1 transfer and only 0.8 left in the budget, you think Gasly is a liability? I don't think he's a liability, MB, but I do think you could... I mean, it's fine. I think Gasly is the best of the bunch. Once you've exhausted the Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, and Magnussen avenues, it's him or Ocon, quite frankly. So I think that's fine. Use 1 transfer, carry a transfer into Zandvoort, then you could use 3 and completely overhaul. Thanks, Joe, for the positive comments. Glad I could help in any way. Triple up on McLaren, preferable, says Tom. I honestly think I might be doing the same. Russell, Piastri, Mercedes, McLaren, because I think Oscar could match Lando this weekend. And it means I can upgrade Tsunoda too. So I think there's a bit more budget in there as well. So keep an eye on the point sims for F1 Fantasy Tools, because I suspect Piastri and Lando will be pretty close. How risky, Rachel asks, do we think it is for Max to be fighting from at least 10 cars behind on the starting line? Yeah, I said this before. I think Max has to get his elbows out early to avoid the traffic. If he gets stuck around, P8 or below, P9 or below after the first 5 laps, it's going to be very hard for him to make up any ground on the leaders. The more time he spends kind of around 10th place, the easier it is for McLaren to build a gap, and the harder it will be for Max to actually make an impact on the race too, certainly towards the end. So I suspect most midfield drivers will probably just respect Max and let him pass them if it gets to that point. I don't think we'll see any crashes, but I do think it will slow him down unless he can suddenly unearth 5 or 6 passes in the first few laps. So we will see. That's one of the reasons why I just don't want the stress of having to deal with that on Sunday. So that's probably why I'm going for a no Max lineup. Silent Sinner, do you guys remember when the mini league starts? There is one. Yeah, you're so right. I believe there was last year right after the summer break for a second half of the season. You can use Team 2 to win the prize. So as it is in Classic F1 Fantasy, my Team 2 is ranked, I think, 1,000th in the world, and my Team 1 is ranked 8.1. Let's have a look. It's not great. And the more frustrating thing is that my team 2 decision is whatever decision, like the alternate decision of what I go for that weekend. So this is my team 1, the one I post about, and it is frustrating that the team 2 is the one that has more budget, has a better rank. If we go down to, where's it? I think you can see the summary of your team this season. So you can see that like I've used different chips at different times on the team 2. When I used no negative in China on my team 1, I used limitless on my team 2 and vice versa. So definitely has definitely shaken out. Not as ideal as I would have hoped, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. How are we feeling about using... Oh goodness, I lost my mark again. How are we feeling using Final Fix? I'm not sure this is the weekend for Final Fix. I've talked myself out of it. Someone floated the idea by me earlier in the week. Jorge, sorry if it's Jorge or George. I'm just not sure if it's worth leaving 5 million on the side to Final Fix in max. Oh wait, sorry, that wasn't Jorge. That was Wassel. Sorry, Wassel. Jorge, thank you for the kind words. Verstappen, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Hulk, Norris, Tsunoda, Ricciardo. Oh, okay. Probably. Oh, I'd say it's pretty even, to be honest. It's like Verstappen. You could just, yeah, it's just Verstappen, Sargent versus Norris, Ricciardo. Is it not? Yeah. I don't know. Pretty close, I think. I'd say it's pretty close. I'm probably going to go Norris just because that's who I'm running this weekend. Parker, yep, love that team. Looks good for this weekend. Google. I don't think this is the official Google. Concerned about the lack of budget building. Yeah, I get that if you're running Bottas, Joe, Sargent, but the points is on the table, so you kind of have to bite the bullet this weekend if you want to go for points or for budget. I'm probably going for a mixture of both. Is triple McLaren with the worst 3 drivers? Yeah, just answered that. I think it's perfectly fine. Okay, 80% of rent during quali. Yeah, I knew it was wet, but I didn't think it was going to be that wet. Let's see. AccuWeather. At least this is the website I use. I don't know necessarily. Here we go. Yeah, my recent search. Monthly, go down to Sunday. Oh no, sorry, Saturday. 85% chance during the day. When's quali? It's in the afternoon local time, isn't it? Okay. It's going to be wet. I think, again, that's kind of something you have to think about, but I wouldn't let it dictate your thinking because the wet weather bug can bite any driver at any point in time. We saw Russell get hit with it last week. We could see someone like K-Mac get hit with it this week. Here's a question, Rob, that ties in with Psychology's question. Hang on. Did I miss Psychology's question? Is triple McLaren the worst 3? Oh, okay. Got it. Thanks, Mike. If we have Hulkenberg, Bottas, Sargent, and top guys, how long can we run that before we really are in a budget hemorrhage vicious circle? You're not wrong, Mike. I definitely think it is something that I've already noticed the last couple of weeks running Sargent, Zhou, or some combination of that. Is my budget isn't increasing as much as I'd like it to. I think for me, that's why I'm maybe leaning towards Piastri. I just want to see, if I see a Piastri in the top 3 in free practice 3, I'll probably go for Piastri Tsunoda over Lando and Zhou or Lando and Logan, because I do think I've noticed my budget is dropping so much further behind some of the guys further up the field. And when it gets to a point of like 0.2, 0.3 million to be able to get to someone like Magnussen as opposed to, I don't know, someone else like an Alpine, it frustrates me. Not that that's the problem I'm grappling with this weekend, but you know, if I'm looking at Lando and Zhou, I see Lando going up 0.1, 0.2, but I see Zhou going down. So they pretty much cancel each other out. I could say the same for Sargent, which is why going for a B tier in Oscar, where I see a little bit more upside, I think he's going up in price. It could be 0.3, it could be 1 million. And then Yuki, who, you know, if it backfires and he DNFs or something, that's egg on my face. But I do think he's one of the more likely C tier drivers to go up in price. So that's one such reason why I could go for a slightly more budget building-esque lineup this weekend to empty out my team. I wish there was a better way of doing this. I wish they had cost cap left over and then like team budget or something right next to it, so you don't have to do this every single time. I'm not even 119, which I think compared to most of you here probably is lower than what your teams are. And that's because of the fact, Mike, to answer your question, that I've been stuck in a loop of that the last few weeks of chasing points, which I think I'm not regretting doing. It's just when you do run these kind of guys in your team, you are left holding the bag a little bit or dropping it altogether. Christo, did Max get a penalty? Welcome to the party, my friend. He absolutely did. 10 places. So he'll be starting no higher than P11 on Sunday. Trust Yuki even with bad practice pace. Arjun, I think, the pace is diabolical for RB right now, but I do think that the fact he starts P20 means all you need are a few DNFs further ahead for him to make the most of those positions gained. I do believe he's got overtakes in his bag to surpass even Zhou and Logan Sargent. I don't know if he's going to be able to get any further up the field than P15 if the pace is as dreadful as expected, but I do suspect that he could at least score about 8 to 10 points. And as we were looking at earlier in the video, all you needed last season was 9 points to see a price increase as a C-tier driver. So that's pretty much all I'm banking on. Do us a solid, add your T2 lineups going forward. Yeah, I absolutely can do that, William. I'm not sure if you want me to, as in add on Twitter, for example. I can. I'll think about it. I'm happy to do it. I tell you what, William, I'll do it in my videos because it's very easy, but I don't want to create confusion. The one thing I do try to avoid is creating confusion, even though maybe I have done a little bit of that with rambling on today. But I definitely think there is a good reason for me to include it moving forward. So happy to do that. 400 points up. I think we'll probably wrap up in the next 5 minutes. So if you've got any last minute questions, get them in the chat now, guys. I'm 400 points up on all my mates this season thanks to this channel. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it, mate. Glad I can help, even if it is just rambling. What about swapping Lando for Piastri and changing Zhou to Yuki? Nick, I'm not sure if you've just joined or you're just repeating what I've been saying, but that's one of the moves I'm looking at this weekend. So yeah, that could be where my head's at for this week if Oscar looks good in FP3. Interesting to see Aston have faster quali sim than the Alpine. The Alpine just seem to have a faster race pace. Maybe worth it to hold on Ocon or Gasly. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think Alpine are fine. I wouldn't double up on them. It's just the reliability is what scares me, and I've been burnt by enough -20s this season to try and play a bit more cautiously lately. So I just wouldn't be going near Aston Martin, to be quite honest. They're both B-tier assets. They're not scoring more than 10 points in a race. I've still got the 2023 scores up there. But yeah, Alonso Stroll, just nowhere near my fantasy teams at the moment. If this wants to load, let's look at Alonso. 4-9. He's had 2 double-digit scores since China. Dreadful. Stroll. I mean, would you guys come after me with your pitchforks if I said Stroll's the number 1 driver in Aston Martin this year? I think fantasy-wise, they're just as both above 15 million, not worth our time. But good point, Rachel. All right, I'll do 2 more questions, guys, and I'm going to wrap it up because I think I've been rambling for just over an hour. I have Norris, Gasly, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Sargent, Red Bull, and McLaren in 1.3. Any thoughts? I think that's perfectly good, William, for that team. Definitely for Spa, a great lineup. I'd probably, if you've got, you'd probably want to see what Red Bull look like in free practice 3 to confidently say whether or not Perez is worth the stress. But I think that's a perfectly good team for budget building this weekend and the overtakes. Yeah, Danny, I don't disagree. Magnussen is the king of the overtakes. It was Joe last year. It's Magnussen this year. He's a cut above the rest, isn't he? Oh, Stroll, you dirty, dirty dog. 5.5. I didn't know he was that high. But yeah, K-Mag, just a figure of consistency in the overtakes. So yeah, big fan of K-Mag. Go with your gut. I think it'll be close between K-Mag and Yuki, but I do think they'll both go up in price. Got it, Nick. Yeah, no dramas, mate. No dramas. What do you think of Mercedes, McLaren, Lando? Yeah, perfectly good, Calvin. Perfectly good. I like that team. Good midfield drivers, high upside for price gain. I think you could... thinking out Lando for Oscar, I wouldn't take a -10 personally. I think you've got the makings of a very good team for Spa. But yeah, that's going to be it, guys. I know it was a bit of a spontaneous dream and I've probably rambled a little bit, but I think I've gotten to almost every question, which was the intent of this stream. If there's enough positive feedback, I'll absolutely do more of these in the future, but I thought I'd just have a bit of spare time in the afternoon to do as much as I can to help you guys out. This is probably what my team's going to look like heading into the deadline, unless Oscar somehow tails off, in which case I could just run it back with my existing team. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting free practice. I will be back with FanAmp on the deadline stream an hour before qualifying tomorrow, so drop by for that as well. And yeah, if you got any other questions, drop them as a comment and I'll answer them before I go to bed tonight. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.